finding other women. That's really what helped me push through those limiting beliefs and seeing, okay, there are other women in the industry. I'm not crazy. I can do this,
Right.
and that was everything.
Hey there, entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Angela Mishuli, your host for the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. And I just wanted to take a brief moment to say thank you for listening. And I'm so excited to share this interview with Dori Stewart of She Turned Entrepreneur podcast. And she has been dubbed as the teacher turned entrepreneur. She has such an inspiring story about how she turned a STEM education program that she developed through an after school club into a curriculum that turned into a business franchise, which she grew to a multi-million-dollar brand. She's just a wonderful person to learn from, and she has been featured on Kiplinger's, Fox Business, Wall Street Journal, Forbes. She has a wonderful story, and it was such a pleasure to interview her, and I am sure that there are some really wonderful lessons for us all to learn from finding community, believing in yourself, and not listening to the naysayers when you know in your gut that you have something that is special and that is of value and is inspiring people. And that's really all you need to go forward. So without further ado, here is my interview with the wonderful Dori Stewart of the She Turned Entrepreneur podcast. Hi, Dori. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Angela. I'm so excited to be here. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. I have to tell you, I had a busy weekend, but all weekend I kept thinking about how excited I was to talk to you because I know we met the end of last year through a podcasting group, and I've seen you have several successes, and that is so inspiring to me. And we've had conversations before, but I just look forward to learning more about your entrepreneurial journey and sharing that with my listeners.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks. So in that, I think the great place to begin is just where your business journey began. I know you were a teacher before, and then at some point, you had this opportunity to start a business. You saw a niche that needed to be filled. And so why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was a high school engineering teacher. I taught for 11 years. And throughout that time, I was also a volunteer teacher of this after school club called the Technology Student Association. And I would take my high school students to competitions all around the country. And throughout that time, I had my own children. And so because this was, a volunteer thing, I was spending a lot of time after schools, on weekends and summers. So I'd go pick my kids up from elementary school, bring them back to the high school with me, and my kids would run around in circles around my high school students while they were building all these really cool engineering projects. And I took my students, and you'll appreciate this being in the travel industry, but I had an opportunity to take my high school students to Orlando, Florida for a national competition and decided my kids would never forgive me if I didn't take them with me.
No.
So I brought them along and carved out some Disney time for them. But what I thought was going to happen is I thought my kids were going to be pestering me the whole week and just, not wanting to be there during the competition and want to just do the Disney thing. But what I found was they would wake up each morning excited about, which competition is today. They were keeping tabs on the high schoolers. And my son actually got upset one day that he couldn't compete. And that was just kind of like, okay, I need to look and see what is being taught in the curriculum in the elementary schools. And this was back in 2008. And STEM wasn't a buzzword yet. Engineering really wasn't introduced in the schools yet, unless you were in the gifted and talented program. Then you had, exposure to engineering. But other than that, it really wasn't there. And so I started looking at programs to put them in, and I couldn't find anything in my town in Virginia. And I got a flyer home one day in my son's backpack that was asking parents if they had a hobby or a business and if they wanted to come and volunteer to teach an after school program for a fundraiser. And so my undergrad degree is in elementary, middle math and science education. And so I had that background to be able to take what I was doing with my high school students, change up the curriculum, make it more developmentally appropriate for the elementary age kids. And I taught a civil engineering class. And I thought, at least my own kids and a couple of their friends will be in the class. I had no idea what the reception was going to be to it, but the class filled up. I had parents pulling me aside, asking what else I had to offer. The principal asked me to come back. Teachers were asking me questions. And so I thought, okay, this could be a really cool side hustle that I could do with my kids.
Right.
They can come with me. They made great guinea pigs for the curriculum.
So cool.
And so I decided I would start a business, and that's how it all began.
I love that story. And that, I think, for me, one of the most important things is just kind of listening to the little messages that you get and kind of being open to just following the breadcrumbs. And
Totally.
Were you always somebody who did that? Or did you just have this burning, did you just have a knowing?
I think that there were a few things happening during that time. One of the things is that I was a teacher making $40,000 a year, and I was in an unhappy marriage with someone who was making a lot more money than me and reminded me of that all the time. And I've always kind of felt like if I'm going to be able to leave this marriage and take care of myself and my kids, teaching is not, a very lucrative career.
Right.
And so there was that was kind of, nudging at me. And then there were also cuts in the county at that time. Like I said, it was not the best of economic times. It was 2008. And so we were in the middle of a recession. And so, there were threats of cutting teachers' contracts and things like that. So there were just some things going on with the school system that, kind of had me thinking there's got to be something better. So I kind of had my ears out anyway. And so it kind of all fell into place in that way.
Right. I mean, I think that that's just so important to just kind of being receptive. One thing, and I have to say this, that one thing I really appreciate about you, and I think that I connect with you, is that I kind of was like in academia before my entrepreneurial journey. And one of my limiting beliefs was that I'm not this I don't have this over the top personality. I'm kind of a quiet person. I guess maybe I would even describe myself as a nerd. And I really followed if you get your education, check. If you do this, check, and all of these things. And I had like this sense that I was waiting for somebody to give me an opportunity that never showed up. And I had all of these limiting ideas surrounding kind of like how I perceive myself and how I was perceived in my job in a supporting role. And I was never going to be, no matter how many certifications or whatever I got in the legal industry, unless I became an attorney, I was never going to be given that, the real decision maker role that I wanted, or really just be able to fulfill my potential. Were there any limiting beliefs that you had to overcome?
Yeah, well, I can completely relate to what you were describing in your career, because as a teacher, I got my master's degree,
Yep.
and then, there's different certifications that you can get, but where is there to go?
Right.
I'm very much an introvert as well, and being an administrator did not appeal to me.
Right.
I didn't want to be the person dealing with all the
Right.
problems in the school.
Right.
And so, where was there to go? And so,
Right.
I think you do kind of start to feel like, okay, well, I guess this is it for me,
Right.
and you start to kind of believe that. And that's why I think I was so ambitious with my students in that club. It gave me a chance to compete. I wasn't the one competing, but I was coaching my students to compete. And that was a way for me to really achieve things and be excited about the job. And so I kind of got my fulfillment through that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that you're most certainly a testament to you can be an introvert. You can be a person who's kind and not like this over the top personality. You don't have to have necessarily those attributes to be able to be successful in business. I mean, I certainly saw it in the legal industry where it was female lawyers had a reputation. They really aggressive attitude, I think is probably the right way to say it, in that that's how they thought they had to be successful. And for me, that didn't feel authentic. So I was like, how can I be successful in business or anything that I want to do and not have that aggressive attitude? So
Absolutely.
so that's something I definitely appreciate and I think is really important. There's a difference. If that's what's authentic for you, then that's fine. I think everybody has a customer, everybody has an audience, but for me that just didn't feel authentic. So were there any other limiting beliefs that you kind of remember that you
Yeah.
had?
Well, I think that the struggle really came for me when I decided to franchise the business. And so when my business became successful and I quit my teaching job, and this was now fast forward a couple years later, and I started to think about ways to grow my business. And I decided that I wanted to grow through franchising. And that's when things got a little bit weird, because I started reaching out to franchise consultants and started to, I'm doing the research. I'm talking to as many people as I can because my background's in education, not in business. And that was, talk about limiting beliefs, okay, well, I don't have a business degree. What do I really know? Going through all of those, feelings. And I actually had a consultant tell me that it wouldn't work, that my business wasn't franchisable. He told me that, who wants to send their 4-year-old to learn about engineering, and your business is successful because of you, and you can't replicate this, because in franchising, you have to make sure that your business can be replicated in another location without you. And they told me it wouldn't work. And so that was tough. So that was a big hurdle that I had to kind of get over myself and just push through and finally decide, okay, I have to take this gamble, because if I don't, you're never going to know. And so that was tough.
Right. How did you, it sounded like part of that getting over that limiting belief hurdle was educating yourself. But
Mhm.
how did you go through that? What was the thing that just like kept pushing your way through that?
Well, so I started learning as much as I could. So I bought every book I could
Yeah.
find on franchising. I was talking
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of people. I went to some conferences. I ultimately got my certification, a certified franchise executive credentials. But
Oh,
what
wow.
really helped is finding other women. That's what helped. And so, unfortunately, in franchising, only about 10% of franchise founders are women, and franchisees, only about 30% are women. And so that was hard to find.
Wow.
But I went to a conference and, I'm talking to as many people as I can find. And I
Mhm.
found a franchise attorney who was so kind, and she did not make me feel stupid. She was patient with me and answered all of my questions and didn't make me feel silly to ask the questions. She was
Right.
very welcoming, and I ended up hiring her, and she was my franchise attorney for the next 10 years. But
That's
it was
awesome.
finding other women. That's really what helped
Mm-hmm.
me push through those limiting beliefs and seeing, okay, there are other women in the industry. I'm not crazy. I can do this,
Right.
and that was everything.
Right. And it sounds like you just had a really strong just belief in your idea and a belief in yourself. Is there something or someone in your life that kind of instilled that in you?
That's a good question. I don't think so much that it was that, in that what was happening is I was in the classroom and I had these little kids, I
Mm.
started at age 4. So it was 4 to 14 was the program. And I had
Wow.
these kids who were so excited to be learning engineering and
Yeah.
using all these big words that I was giving them. And so the kids were having a good time, but the parents were coming in, and the parents were excited to sign them up for the next program because the parents saw the educational value.
Right.
So I felt deep down that I had found this magic where I had kids who were learning and wanted to come back and having
Right.
fun, and parents who wanted to sign them up. So I
Right.
felt like it wasn't just something that parents were going to push. I felt like I
Wow.
had the magic. And so I
Uh-huh.
just had this belief that
Right.
everyone needs this. Like 4-year-olds need to learn
Yeah.
engineering. And
Yeah.
another thing going on at that time is my high school students, I would have girls come
Uh-huh.
into my classroom, and they were finding out about my classes because I had this cool, fun club that got to travel to Florida in the summers. And so, but they would sign up for my classes because of the club. And once they got into it, they would say, wow, I didn't really know what engineering was. I wish I had learned about this sooner. And I feel like if I had taken the right classes earlier, I may have been more competitive to get into engineering colleges. And so all of these things kind of combined gave me this conviction that everyone needs this.
That's really awesome in that you were seeing evidence of it working and inspiring that some consultant may have never seen that on paper. It may have looked impossible and not workable, but you were really seeing the evidence that it would. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a great lesson in that people can tell you whatever, but if you
Mm-hmm.
can see evidence and look for the evidence and listen to it, like
Mm-hmm.
that spoke louder to you than someone who was a quote unquote expert.
Yeah. I mean, I tell everyone, I'm like, if you have an idea,
Right.
try it. And
Right.
I think that people are afraid to try things.
Right.
They're afraid of failing. They're afraid of, you
Mm-hmm.
know, looking bad, to their peers. But I always tell everyone, just try it, because
Right.
once you see a little bit of success, that
Mm-hmm.
fuels you to keep going.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that that's honestly so true. I mean, I've seen it so much in my life, in my business journey. I mean, being a part of the travel industry, there's so many other people also in the travel industry that it's like I feel sometimes people who want to start a travel business, you're like a drop in a ocean, but quite honestly, everybody has something unique to offer. I mean, somebody connects with you individually because of your story, whether it's I'm a military spouse or I have daughters or whatnot. I mean, I just find the people who are attracted to me, who want to work with me, resonate with my story. And it's just like, it is magic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, it is really incredible and it exists, if you just keep on going with your dream and you look for evidence and you listen to what's going on around you, that it can work and you're on this path for a reason.
Totally. Yeah.
So I along with that, I think one of the top limiting beliefs that I hear about especially moms who want to start a business is that you have to work 24/7 in that. And so that's really a conception that I want to work to change, in that I'm curious how, once you began this journey of being an entrepreneur, how did that affect your family? Did you have to work 24/7? Are there lessons that you learned on how to juggle your family and being a business owner?
Yeah, I would say to include your family as much as possible in what you're doing. The good times, the bad times, let them be on the roller coaster with you. And I was really fortunate that my kids were the perfect ages when I started. They were my guinea pigs. And it was cool because I was offering classes at their school. They'd go to shirts that they go to school in the t-shirts with the logo on it. And they were so proud that, their mom was the owner of the business.
Yes.
But then as they got older, they became teachers in the program and they would help out with curriculum. And they would always, ask questions about what was going on. And we started franchising internationally. And my son is a geography nerd. And that was so exciting to him to learn about the different countries that, we were going in. And so, I mean, yeah, there were in the beginning, especially before I was able to hire a staff, I was, getting up at 4 a.m. and working a few hours before they woke up so that I could get, some uninterrupted time in. Right. But, once things got, rolling and I was able to hire staff, I was able to, not have to spend that much time, getting up at 4 a.m.
Right. Yeah.
But I say, include your family as much as possible. And, I think that as moms, we try to shield our kids from things that are going on. And I think that actually does them a disservice. I think that they need to hear the good and the bad.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, like I totally relate to that because traveling with my daughters is everything. And it's just really like that time and those experiences truly were like my fuel for wanting to be a travel advisor, because I wanted everybody to know what this felt like. Just like these moments are fleeting. They're just going to pass you by. And if you don't take the time to really cherish them and plan them well, I mean, you can't get time back, right?
Yeah.
So I see an impact on my girls starting a business and being a business owner. What do you think, as a mom, starting a business has had on your children?
I think it's definitely had an impact. I mean, I think that they got to see what someone can create, and that it's possible to have an idea and to turn it into something big. So I think that's a huge lesson. I think that they also see that hard work pays off. They saw how hard I worked and they saw what it was able to afford us. And so I think that that's a huge lesson. They're and including them, helped with that because they saw, how hard I worked.
Right. There is this new concept of expander parenting where the idea is that to provide the most for our children as moms, especially, is kind of living our fullest expression. And that helps them see a world of possibility. And I think, not everybody's meant to be a business owner. Maybe it's just taking the next step to a level that you didn't think possible in your career. But I truly think that is, can you imagine, had you not taken those risks and believed in yourself and believed in your idea, where your life would be now? And also, would your children have that concept of like anything is possible?
Yeah, I don't think that they would. I have thought about that, and COVID had me thinking about that, because my heart goes out to the teachers who had to teach through that, and some are still dealing with all of that.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what my life would be like if I had stayed teaching. And yeah, I mean, my kids maybe wouldn't have seen the possibility in, hard work and a business if I hadn't.
Right. So I think, so often it's easy to be self-focused on your business and yourself. So I just love to just highlight that we're not doing this just for ourselves. We're not in a vacuum, but, we have our children to think about. And,
yeah,
it really truly has an impact on them. And I think for the better. Even if we do have to wake up at 4 a.m. and lose little bit of sleep to get what we want to get done, they really model us and they see. So you had all of this success in your franchise, but, we met through a podcasting group. So you decided you probably could have been fine, continuing down the path you're going, but you decided to take this new journey to starting a podcast. So I would love to hear about the wins. I know about some of them, but I love to highlight that starting a business is just not like starting a business and your end destination is quote unquote success, whatever that means to you, whether that's just being able to make so much per month or take an extra vacation or whatever that is for you. But it's really a journey that leads you to many other journeys. So let's talk about your podcast.
Sure. Yeah. So there were a few articles that wrote pieces about me, and they kind of dubbed me as the teacher turned entrepreneur.
Right.
And so I started a podcast called She Turned Entrepreneur, where I interview fabulous women like yourself.
Thank you.
And where, I share the stories of women who have gone from, a 9-to-5 to starting a business on their own, and sharing their stories and sharing, tips and inspiration for other women who are starting their own business or wanting to become an entrepreneur.
And so you have now released almost 60 episodes. I mean, you have surpassed what is it, 70% of podcasts end at like 7 episodes or something like that.
It's wild, isn't that?
Right? I mean, and what Forbes has picked up on one of your quotes.
Yeah.
I mean, you have really, you inspire me. I've been a little slow in coming, and we had some health issues at the beginning of the year. We had COVID twice in our house in 2022.
Oh my gosh.
It was, it was rough going. So that's been inspiring to me. But that I think sometimes people have a tendency to just look at someone's successes and not look at the hard work or know about the obstacles that you kind of had to go through to get to the successes. Can you talk about some of those obstacles that you had and how you kind of kept going despite them?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back to 2019. Excuse
Yeah.
me. I kind of always knew that I would end up selling my franchise company. Private equity loves scooping up franchise companies because it's
Oh,
easy for them to pump money in, flip, and make a big return. And
gotcha.
so I had received a lot of offers in the past, and I always turned them down because I didn't want my business to be flipped.
Gotcha.
But I did
Gotcha.
get an offer in 2019 from an
Uh-huh.
ed tech firm who had other education franchise companies under their belt, and they were looking to add a STEM concept to their portfolio.
Gotcha.
And so I received the offer in 2019. I was on the fence. I didn't know if it was the right time.
Mhm.
And then 2020 rolls around and COVID hits. And because they are an ed tech company and have already one of their companies virtual, it made sense at the time to do that. So I sold my business in 2020 and I stayed on for about 6 months through a transition to make sure the franchisees, were well taken care of before I left. And so then, yeah, it was kind of a weird time for me, not really knowing what was next for me and next, I'm too young to retire. What do I do?
Right.
And so I decided that I would just help other women and do what I could to, kind of narrow the gap of the lack of women in franchising. And
Mhm.
as part of the podcast, I have a Franchise Friday segment where I introduce
Right.
my audience to a different franchise brand on Fridays. And, my
Yeah.
goal is to help as many women as possible get into franchising, whether that's taking your small business and growing it through franchising or buying a franchise and helping them find the right franchise fit.
That is I've listened to your podcast and it's so interesting because I'm business minded but never thought about a franchise
Mm,
necessarily for whatever reason, and it's so interesting to hear the women on your podcast to share their entrepreneurial journey and franchising journey from their unique franchises that they have. I think for me as like an outsider, I think restaurants or yeah, I know for
yeah.
whatever reason when it comes to franchises, but
Hmm.
the diversity of the types of franchises that there actually are
Hmm.
so interesting. Um so yeah, I really find it interesting in learning about the different things that to keep in mind with franchises when I listen to your podcast episodes. They're really interesting. I am curious about any advice that you would have for women who are interested in going into a franchise or learning more about franchising other than checking out your podcast, obviously.
Well, I would say if anyone is looking to buy a franchise,
Hmm.
my biggest piece of advice is don't go directly to that specific franchise. So
Interesting.
let's say it's a travel franchise company.
Uh-huh.
Don't go straight to the franchisor,
Uh-huh.
because what's going to happen if you do that,
Uh-huh.
they're going to tell you only the good things, only the things that they want to tell you
Gotcha.
about the franchise. And you
Gotcha.
could emotionally attach to that brand and not look at other options.
Interesting.
And what I do is I'm kind of like a real estate agent, but for franchising. So
Gotcha.
instead of helping people find houses, I help people find franchises. And so my services are free to my clients. And so I can help people weed through the thousands of franchise brands. I can help show them what red flags to look for. I can teach them, things to, questions to ask, things to look out for. But really doing the due diligence, not rushing into anything, researching and talking to as many existing franchisees as possible would be my biggest advice.
Interesting. So and this was a question I was going to ask you. It looks like your podcast has led you to starting a franchise consulting business. So that's one thing that you're doing now.
Yes.
That's so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, and is that something you kind of thought before starting the podcast, or is it something that just kind of evolved?
It kind of evolved, you know, in when I'm interviewed on podcasts and things like that, the thing that I'm asked often most about is franchising. And so realizing that there are a lot of misconceptions about franchising, it's something that I'm passionate about. I've been immersed in it in the last 15 years. So I'm really enjoying, you know, educating people about franchising and helping people through franchising.
That's just really incredible. And it's just like a testament to becoming an entrepreneur can really just open yourself up to many wonderful surprises that you may have never even imagined. Like when you were starting your initial after school program, like, did you ever think that it would one day be franchised when you were beginning it?
No. I mean, back then I was all insecure that I didn't have a business degree.
Right. I
so
mean,
to think that I'm now a consultant is like, what?
Right. I mean, that is just like, that is so incredible. And I think for me, just kind of keeps me going every day. Like you never have, like they're wonderful because you kind of show up and put your hand up to the universe or whatever it is that how you organize in your mind the world that we live in. But it's like starting a business and taking a chance is kind of putting your hand up that you're like ready to and available to accept whatever possibility like kind of happens that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just, I really think that sharing stories like that with people are important because I mean, for me, going to work 9 to 5, it was kind of like very predictable and safe. And, you know, and that was fine. But at some point, I just needed more.
Yeah.
It's like I knew that there was more that had to be going on. So given your journey and where you are now and looking back to when you first started, and what are some things that you would tell yourself if you could go back and just, you know, meet yourself 10 years ago or 14 years ago, and say, look, here's something that's going to keep you going?
Yeah. I mean, I would go back and tell myself, you got this. You don't have to have a business degree. I would give myself confidence. You know, I think that when you are a new entrepreneur, you second guess yourself a lot. And so I would go back and tell myself, you're smart enough to do this. You have got this. You can do it. It's going to be big. It's worth all the hard work.
Yeah, I think that that's just so important. And you just don't get that unless you take the chances and you try. So, I mean, if you have a little tap on your shoulder, if you have a little just voice in your head that says you need to be starting something, whatever it is, I don't care if it's a painting class or whatever, who knows? And you're going to get little signs from the universe, just like you had success with this after school group, and what you were doing was inspiring people and was, you know, lighting them up and making them excited to be in your presence and be in your club. If you're having that experience, just follow that breadcrumb.
Yeah.
And it sounds like not only did you do that, but you found through trial and error, you found a community, you found the people to reinforce kind of what you were feeling.
Yeah.
And kind of set it in motion and put it all in action. I think that's so inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So, if anyone wants to connect with you, like obviously you can find She Turned Entrepreneur podcast anywhere that, podcasts are available. But how else can they follow you and connect with you? And
Yeah. So my website is doristewart.com.
mm-hmm.
And so that's the best place to go. I'm also all over social media as She Turned Entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so I offer free discovery calls if anyone is interested in looking at franchising, either on the purchasing side or if they want to franchise their small business.
Yep. I love it, Dori. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I have no doubt that your story is going to inspire lots of other women.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Dori Stewart for spending time with me to talk about her entrepreneurial journey. And I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. I just think she's so inspiring, and her story just really resonates with finding your community and believing in whatever you're doing, despite anyone else in your life who may be telling you something otherwise. If you found this interview helpful, please let me know. Please leave a review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps the show. Share this podcast with a friend. And also be sure that you're following me on Angela.Mashulli, MASCIULLI on Instagram. And I look forward to bringing you many more wonderful interviews with some really incredible entrepreneurs coming up soon. Thanks for joining me.